جنب المصحف الهادي الدليل تمضي كتائبنا مع الفجر المجلجل بالصهيل نمضي ولا
Allah Azza wa Jalla says, when angels take the souls of those who die in sin against their souls, the ones who have wronged themselves, the ones who have oppressed themselves. Dhulm is oppression. These are people who have committed oppression against who? Against their own selves. Why live with your family in a place where every indication shows that it is Dar al-Kufr and will remain Dar al-Kufr? Not only that, but it will be the enemy of the Muslims from now until eternity, as hadith of Rasulullah state. من جامع مشرك وسكن معه فإنه مثله. The one who lives among the mushrikeen is from among the mushrikeen. فإنه مثله. He's like المشركين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. The topic of Hijrah, a very important topic. And it's an issue that was mentioned in the Quran, issue that was mentioned in Hadith, an issue that was for a while one of the central issues of being Muslim. When Mecca was Dar Kufr and Medina was Dar Iman, Hijrah was a distinguishing factor between Iman and Kufr. That was how central Hijrah was in those days. If you're with us in Medina, then you are part of the awliya of Allah. If you're not, then it's not our responsibility to protect you, it's not our responsibility to defend you, and then your hisab is on Allah Azza wa Jalla on the Day of Judgment. So Hijrah for some time was a very, very important issue. After that, it wasn't really stressed a lot by our scholars because everybody was living in Dar al-Islam. I mean, no one was living in the Dar al-Kufr. So they didn't talk much about it because it wasn't a problem. And in the time of the Khilafah, there wasn't any Muslim. This issue, for example, that we have today, of somebody going to the land of the disbelievers and living there for the sake of tijara, business, or even for the sake of da'wah, was something that didn't exist before. It wasn't like somebody would go out fi sabilillah and live among the kuffar to do da'wah then. You go under the banners of mujahideen fi sabilillah. That's how it was before. So we don't find that the fuqaha talked a lot about hijrah because they were tackling the problems of the day and that wasn't a problem. Every Muslim was living in Dar al-Islam anyway. Yes, there were periods now and then we have this issue, like for example when Andalus fell and some Muslims stay behind, then they did talk about, there's a fatwa from the scholars of Al-Maghrib that you Muslims living in Spain need to move out. There is that fatwa. But this was an occasional problem that would come now and then. It wasn't like something that was in the time of Abu Hanif or Imam al-Shafi'i or Malik or Ahmed. The problem wasn't there. There is two types of hijrah. One hijrah is a hijrah that is mandatory on everyone all the time. And this is the hijrah which Rasulullah talked about in the Sahih Hadith in Bukhari. Al-Muslimu man salima al-Muslimuna min lisanihi wa yadih wal-muhajir man hajara ma naha Allahu anhu. The Muslim is the one whom the Muslims are safe from his tongue and his hand. If the Muslims are safe from your tongue and your hand, then you're a Muslim. And the muhajir, the one who makes hijrah, is the one who leaves, makes hijrah from the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited. So this is a hijrah that every one of us needs to do in every age and time. Hijrah from sin to ta'ah. From al-ma'siyah ila ta'ah. From sin to obeying Allah Azza wa Jalla. This is a hijrah that you have to do all the time. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Al-mu'minu man aminahu an-nas ala amwalihim wa anfusihim, wal-muhajir man hajara al-khataya wa dhunub." The mu'min is the one whom the people are safe from him when it comes to their wealth and their self, so that he doesn't harm them in their nafs or in their wealth, in their belongings. And the muhajir is the one who leaves the dhunub, the sins. And then Rasulullah says, أفضل الهجرة أن تهجر ما كره ربك. The best hijrah is when you leave the things that Allah dislikes. Because the word hijrah means moving or leaving something behind. Ibn Hajar says, وهذه الهجرة ضربان ظاهرة وباطنة فالباطنة ترك ما تدعو إليه النفس الأمارة بالسوء والشيطان والظاهرة الفرار بالدين من الفتن. Ibn Hajar says there are two types of hijrah. There's the outside hijrah and there's an inside hijrah. The inside hijrah is when you leave what the evil soul tells you and what shaitan tells you. And then there's the outside hijrah, and that is fleeing for the sake of your religion. So this is the general hijrah. But we want to talk about the specific hijrah. We want to talk about the outside hijrah, which Ibn Hajar calls al-hijrah al-zahira. This is the hijrah that we want to spend our time talking about. With this hijrah, the hijrah which is moving from one place to another, I'm going to base it on ayat from Quran. If Quran is the book of huda, and we want to talk about something that Quran has mentioned to us, why go search elsewhere when the answer is in the book of Allah? Now, when you listen to these ayat, you want these ayat to speak to your heart. We're not going to be talking about hijrah in terms of fiqh, the hukum of it, haram, halal, mubah, mustahab. We're going to be talking about hijrah based on the ayat of Quran and the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But subhanallah, when it comes to the issue of hijrah, if you don't allow the ayah to talk to you, to speak to your heart, you're not going to understand the meaning. You're not going to understand what is intended. And this is how we should deal with all the ayat of Quran, because Allah Azza wa Jalla says, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لِذِكْرَ لِمَنْ كَانَ لَهُ قَلْبٌ أَوْ أَلْقَى السَّمْعَ وَهُوَ شَهِيدٌ. There is a reminder in this book for who? For the one who has a heart. لِمَنْ كَانَ لَهُ قَلْبٌ. If you don't have a heart, if you want to take Quran dry, without having it speaking to your spirituality, speaking to your heart, you won't benefit from it. Because Allah Azza wa Jalla says that the reminder is not for everyone. The reminder is for the one who has a heart. أو ألقى السمع وهو شهيد, or listens attentively and gives heed. These are the ones who would benefit from the Quran. However, Allah Azza wa Jalla says about الظالمون ولا يزيد الظالمين إلا خسارة. Quran only adds to the loss of the oppressors. It doesn't bring them closer. It draws them even further away. That is what the Quran is, Al-Furqan. Furqan, it comes and splits the people in half. Some people go to Ar-Rahman and some people go to Ash-Shaytan. That's what Quran does. It is Furqan. Furqan is something that splits the thing in the middle and turns them into two pieces. That is what Quran does to the people. فَإِذَا هُمْ فَرِيقَانِ يَخْتَصِمُونَ. Allah Azza wa Jalla says about Salih, when he went to his people, the people were united. فَإِذَا هُمْ فَرِيقَانِ يَخْتَصِمُونَ. After Salih alayhi salam, now there were two parties fighting each other. When you hear the ayat about hijrah, have them speak to your heart, because the issue of hijrah is a difficult issue. Always, not only today. That's how hijrah was in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Many Muslims today want to make hijrah, but they want to make hijrah to a place where they're going to make more money. You know, I want to make hijrah fi sabilillah, but I want an increase in my salary. I want a better house. I want better living. All of the Sahaba who made hijrah by sacrificing. Some of them most of their wealth, some of them all of their wealth. Hijrah wasn't easy for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It wasn't easy for any of the Sahaba. Hijrah was a risk then, and it's a risk now. We're going to start with ayat from Surah An-Nisa. 4 ayat from Surah An-Nisa that talk about the issue of hijrah. But a little bit background on the reason why these ayat were revealed. There were some Muslims who stayed behind in Mecca, and then hijrah was wajib, was fard. They did not make hijrah. And when the people of Quraysh marched out in the Battle of Badr, they came out with their people. You know, just like some Muslims living in America had to join the US Army when it's fighting against Muslims, these felt compelled to join with Quraysh when it was going to fight against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this hadith is in Bukhari. And the narration of this was in Bukhari, that the ayat were revealed talking about these people. They went out probably with the intention of not firing against the Muslims. Exactly as it was the intention of the Muslim soldiers in the US Army not to fire against Muslims. So the narration says, فَيَأْتِ السَّهْمْ فَيُصِيبُ هَذَا وَيُصِيبُ هَذَا. And the arrows of the Muslims would strike this person and this person, and they didn't go out with the intention of killing Muslims. They just went out silently among the army, and they were not participating in the fighting. But some of them got killed by the Muslims. These ayat were revealed talking about them. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَوَفَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, when angels take the souls of those who die in sin against their souls. So Allah Azza wa Jal calls them ظالمي, the ones who have wronged themselves, the ones who have oppressed themselves. Dhulm is oppression. These are people who have committed oppression against who? Against their own selves. The angels take away their souls. We know that the angels are the ones who take away the nafs. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تَوَفَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ ظَالِمِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. They don't take their souls quietly, but they take their souls and they ask them the following question. فِيمَ كُنْتُمْ. What was your plight? فِيمَ كُنْتُمْ. Where were you? What were you doing? You were among the people of Quraysh. You were living in Mecca and you didn't make Hijrah to Medina. Why? So the angels won't wait until the Day of Judgment to ask this question. They won't wait even before that to ask the question in the grave. They ask them right then and there when they're taking their souls. This is a question that cannot be delayed. What were you doing? فِيمَ كُنْتُمْ. Where were you? So these people will answer back. They will say, قَالُوا كُنَّا مُسْتَضْعَفِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. We were weak in the land. We were weak. Brothers, there's no problem in being weak if there's no other alternative. The Sahaba and Rasulullah lived for 13 years in this situation. They were mustad'afin. They were the weaker party in Mecca. But the moment they found the alternative, it becomes wajib to move out and stop living as a mustad'af. If you have the choice to live with izzah, why live in a state of humiliation, in a state of weakness? When there's no other alternative, it's good to have sabr. But when the alternative is there and you don't make hijrah because of two reasons, fear for your wealth and fear for your safety, then you are committing oppression against yourself. قَالُوا كُنَّا مُسْتَضْعَفِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. You can sense humiliation in their answer. We were weak. And subhanAllah, this is the situation of the one who accepts to live among the kuffar when an alternative exists. And this weakness is even reflected in the fiqh that comes out when you live among the kuffar. So you start hearing fatwa like, sisters don't have to wear the hijab anymore. Muslims in the armies of kuffar can fight with them. You can buy houses with riba, mortgage. So the whole fiqh becomes a weak fiqh. It reflects the situation. So you have fiqh istid'af, you have the fiqh of people who are weak. And you have conferences that justify being weak. So when the kuffar have their foot over your neck and you're talking about Islam being the religion of peace and tolerance, and you need to be talking about how to fight back, how to move the foot of the kafir from over your neck, rather than talk about peace and tolerance. And yes, Islam is a religion of tolerance, but sometimes you need to also point out that Islam is a religion of justice. And there's a time when you want to talk about tolerance, and there's an appropriate time when you want to talk about justice. So the whole culture becomes a culture of weakness. قَالُوا كُنَّا مُسْتَضْعَفِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. What did the angels say? The angels responded by saying, أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. Wasn't the earth of Allah spacious enough for you to make hijrah therein? This excuse is not accepted. Now, again, I want to stress the fact that we're not talking about ahkam here, because it is unfair to give a certain hukum on hijrah when the circumstances are different. The circumstance that we had before was that Mecca was clearly Dar al-Kufr and Medina was clearly Dar al-Iman. So that hijrah was fard. Now we have the Dar al-Kufr, but there's a slight problem with the other flip side of the coin, the Dar al-Iman. So we have half of the equation, we don't have the whole equation. So giving the hukum on this situation is not straightforward as it is in the case before. We're talking about the concept of hijrah in general. And the hukum of hijrah now could be different from one person to another, and it could be different from one time to another. For example, I think there's a difference between pre-September 11th and post-September 11th. For example, in America. There is a difference. Before, the field was open for da'wah. Now things are becoming different. The issue is not straightforward when we're talking about the hukum, but we want to emphasize on the concept of hijrah itself and turn attention to the Muslims that the issue of hijrah is an important issue. And you need to absorb these ayat and see if the conditions apply to you. If they do, then you need to find a way out. أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. Wasn't the earth of Allah spacious enough? Allah Azza wa Jalla has created this entire earth, 5 continents. Wasn't there space sufficient for you to go and move out and make hijrah? Why did you have to stay in Mecca and end up coming out with the army of Quraysh to fight against the Muslims in Badr, when Medina is a few hundred kilometers away? The one who wants to have taqwa of Allah Azza wa Jal will find a way out. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Allah will find a way out for you if you have taqwa. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسَبُ. And your rizq will come from places that you didn't expect. You didn't expect. If you expected it, there won't be a test anymore. But the test is that you don't know where the rizq is going to come from, and then it does come. It is a test to see if you put your trust in Allah Azza wa Jalla or not. So what is their fate? Allah Azza wa Jalla says, فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَأْوَاهُمْ جَهَنَّمْ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. Their abode is hellfire. These people who refuse to make hijrah, their abode is hellfire. They accepted humiliation in dunya, so Allah Azza wa Jalla will humiliate them in akhirah. But there's an exception. إلا المستضعفين من الرجال والنساء والولدان لا يستطيعون حيلة ولا يهتدون سبيلا. The exception is, except those who are really weak and oppressed, men, women and children who have no means in their power nor a guide to direct their way. Now we have to put this into the right perspective, because somebody might say, I can't make hijrah when they can. And the reason why they're saying they can't make hijrah is because they have a slight fear for their safety, and they have a slight fear when it comes to the rizq. No, the exception doesn't apply to these, because we know that every muhajir who made hijrah in the time of Rasulullah was taking a risk. And we know that the muhajirun from Mecca, they left their wealth behind. So the risk was great. The exception is those whom it is impossible for them to move out. Very difficult, they just can't. They have no way to do it. These are an exception, and Allah Azza wa Jalla says about them, فَأُولَٰئِكَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَعْفُوَ عَنْهُمْ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَفُوًا غَفُورًا. For these there is hope that Allah will forgive, for Allah does blot out sins and forgive again and again. So again, what are the 2 things that keep people behind from making hijrah? Number 1, safety. Number 2, rizq. When you get accustomed to a certain location or a certain place, you know the people, your network of friends is there. You have a job, you established yourself, you have a house, your wife has friends, your kids are doing well in school, everything is established. And now you want to move out, you want to uproot yourself from that place and go somewhere else. There is difficulty involved in that. You're going to a place, you might feel as a foreigner. Your wife, is she going to have any friends, or will she be spending all of her time at home, nobody's speaking to her? My kids, will they feel accepted at school, or will they be treated as foreigners and get into trouble and not like it? How am I going to make a living? I'm going to leave my job. I have a very nice job, it's paying me well. I'm going to go somewhere else. How am I going to live? These are the concerns that the muhajir has. The following ayah talks to you and says, وَمَنْ يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ يَجِدْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُرَاغَمًا كَثِيرًا وَسَعًا ومن يخرج من بيته مهاجرا إلى الله ورسوله ثم يدركه الموت فقد وقع أجره على الله وكان الله غفورا رحيما. He who forsakes his home in the cause of Allah. So it's hijrah, not for the sake of wealth, not for the sake of, in the hadith, من هاجر إلى امرأة, somebody who he wants to marry, or dunya yusibuha. No, this is hijrah fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah. He who forsakes his home in the cause of Allah finds in the earth muraghaman. What does muraghaman mean? The Mufassirin say muragham means mana, protection. It could also mean a place to maneuver. The enemy of Allah is behind you, go and maneuver somewhere else. The earth is wide enough for you to take another shot at the adu of Allah, to take a place and go and maneuver from the adu of Allah Azza wa Jalla. That's what Rasulullah did when he moved out from Mecca. They cornered you in Mecca, go and try in Medina. So the ayah says that muraghama means don't corner yourself in one place. You'll find some protection, you'll find man'a somewhere else, you'll find support somewhere else if you just search. For Rasulullah ﷺ it wasn't easy. He spent a few years looking for a place to move out to, but then Allah Azza wa Jal gave it to him. But there's some effort that was put into that. And sometimes we want the solution to come without us doing anything. No, you have to take the first step. Because it says in the Hadith Qudusi, if you walk towards Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah will run towards you. If you take one step towards Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah will take many steps towards you. But you are the one who starts. You need to take that first step, and then Allah Azza wa Jal will do the rest for you. Muraghaman kathira. Muragham. Kathiran wa sa'a. What does sa'a mean? The Mufassirin said, and rizq. So the two concerns that you have, safety and rizq, Allah has promised you that you'll find them in Hijrah. So you could imagine Hijrah as asking somebody to jump from a cliff, but put your trust in Allah Azza wa Jal. And you're not allowed to look what is at the bottom. You're not allowed to see what's at the bottom. Is it water or is it rocks or what? But you have to take that jump. You have to put your trust in Allah Azza wa Jal and jump the cliff. That is Hijrah. You don't know what's on the other side. You have to put your trust in Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah is telling you, you will find muragham and you will find sa'a. That is promise. Even though it doesn't look easy. Hijrah doesn't look easy, but Allah Azza wa Jal has promised you that. And then Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَمَنْ يَخْرُجْ مِنْ بَيْتِهِ مُهَاجِرًا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ ثُمَّ يُدْرِكْهُ الْمَوْتِ فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Should he die as a refugee from his home for Allah and His Messenger, his reward becomes due. Now death, Allah is not promising you protection from death. Because death could come to you whether you make hijrah or you don't. So Allah is not going to promise you protection from death. You can die whether you stay in Mecca or you go to Medina, you will die. But Allah Azza wa Jal promises you here that if you make hijrah, you'll get the ajr. ثُمَّ يُدْرِكْهُ الْمَوْتِ فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. You'll get the ajr. Even if you didn't complete the journey, you will get the ajr of hijrah. So you're promised two things, but you're not promised one. You're not promised protection from death, but you're promised rizq and you're promised man'a, a place to maneuver from the enemy of Allah Azza wa Jal. The earth is wide enough, and the Anbiya made hijrah. Musa made hijrah, and when he reached to the land of Palestine, what did the man in Madian tell him? نَجَوْتَ مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. Here you are safe from the oppressing people. And when Rasulullah ﷺ made hijrah to Medina, the people of Medina told them, here you are safe from the enemy of Allah. We'll fight for you as we fight for our families. And you see the stories of the Muhajirin today, and you can see the stories of the Muhajirin yesterday. The ones who make hijrah, Allah Azza wa Jal blesses their effort and offers them protection from the enemies of Allah Azza wa Jal. طيب, and Allah Azza wa Jal also says, وَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا فِي اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا ظُلِمُوا لَنُبَوِّئَنَّهُمْ فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَلَأَجْرُ الْآخِرَةِ أَكْبَرُ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. And as for those who immigrated for the cause of Allah after they had been wronged, we will certainly give them goodly residence in this world. But indeed the reward of the hereafter will be greater if they but knew. So Allah will give you hasana in this dunya and give you even better than that in akhirah. Ibn Kathir says, Ibn Abbas, Al-Sha'bi and Qatada said that the meaning of hasana here is Medina. But others, like Mujahid, they say it means a rizq tayyib. Allah will give you pure rizq. So Allah does not promise large quantity of rizq, but He promises that it will be tayyib. Whether it is little or a lot, it will be tayyib. It will be pure. Your wealth could be very limited, but there's barakah in it. While the wealth of somebody else could be vast and huge, but there's no barakah in it. So the issue of wealth here is not numbers, but the issue here is barakah. Whether there is barakah in it or there's no barakah in it. And Ibn Kathir talks about this. He says, ولا منافاة بين القولين فإنهم تركوا مساكنهم وأموالهم فعوضهم الله خيرا منها في الدنيا. He said these muhajirin whom the ayah is talking about, they left their dwellings and their wealth behind, so Allah Azza wa Jal gave them better than what they left. فإن من ترك شيئا لله عوضه الله بما هو خير منه. If you leave something for Allah, Allah will definitely give you something better. وكذلك وقع فإنهم مكن الله لهم في البلاد وحكمهم على رقاب العباد وصاروا أمراء حكاما وكل منهم للمتقين إماما. He said, because Allah Azza wa Jal gave them establishment in the earth and He allowed them to rule over the land, and they became leaders and judges, and every one of them was an imam for the muttaqeen. So these people who had limited wealth in Mecca and would have lived and died in Mecca, and that was the end of it, and nobody would have heard about them or who they are, suddenly they became the guides for the entire earth. They are the ones who were carrying the beacons of light that would guide the path for humanity towards Jannah. It was these people who made Hijrah from Mecca to Medina. And now one of them is Amir of Iraq, and the other one is Amir over Egypt, and somebody else is Amir over... They went all over the earth spreading the da'wah of Islam. So Allah Azza wa Jalla has given them in dunya better than what they left behind, and then Allah says, and what they will get in akhirah is even better. Umar bin Khattab كان إذا أعطى الرجل من المهاجرين عطاه يقول خذ بارك الله لك فيه هذا ما وعدك في الدنيا وما ادخر لك الله في الآخرة أفضل. Umar bin Khattab, when he would give the muhajirin their share of the booty, he would tell them, take this. This is what Allah has promised you in dunya, and what Allah has promised you in akhirah is even better. This is all because of the barakah of Hijrah. Why Hijrah? Why make Hijrah? Number one, because it is the order of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, آمركم بخمس وأنا آمركم بخمس كلمات أمرني الله بهن السمع والطاعة والجماعة والهجرة والجهاد. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I have 5 commands for you. Sam' wa ta'a. You listen and you obey. Al-Jama'ah. Be with the group, with the Jama'ah of the Muslimin. Hijrah and Jihad fi sabilillah. These are the 5 commands of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you notice that these are the 5 essential elements for a successful Jama'ah that would establish the religion of Allah. You need to have Sam' and ta'a, to listen and obey. And that means there's an Amir and there's a Jama'ah. It's a group. It's a collective effort. Jama'ah, to be part of the group and not to be alone. Because when you have splattered efforts here and there, different than when everybody is serving a Jama'ah and you have synergy of the effort of everyone, that is when Allah Azza wa Jal puts barakah in the work. And then you have Hijrah fi sabilillah, and you have Jihad. And we would notice that Hijrah and Jihad are frequently mentioned together. Why? Because Hijrah, many times Jihad demands Hijrah before. To make Jihad, you need to make Hijrah. So they are associated together, and in some ayat, 3 things are associated: Iman, Hijrah, and Jihad. So these 3 things are linked. Now, this order of Hijrah is not temporary, but it stands until the Day of Judgment. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, إن الهجرة لا تنقطع ما دام الجهاد. Hijrah does not stop as long as Jihad doesn't stop. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, لن تنقطع الهجرة ما قتل الكفار. There will always be Hijrah as long as there is an enemy of Allah to fight. As long as there is an enemy of Allah to fight, you need to make Hijrah to go and fight him. So the Hijrah to Medina was a Hijrah for the sake of Jihad fi sabilillah, because it was the base of the Mujahideen. Medina was the base of al-Mujahideen. Number 2, Bara'ah from al-Mushrikeen, disassociating oneself from al-Mushrikeen. This is number 2 of why make Hijrah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in the hadith, برئت الذمة ممن أقام مع المشركين في ديارهم. I disavow or I disassociate myself from whoever lives among the mushrikeen in their dwellings. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, إني بريء من كل مسلم مع مشرك ألا لا تراءى نارهما. I disassociate myself from any Muslim who lives with the mushrikeen. They should not see the lights of each other. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that you should be far away from the mushrikeen, that you don't even see their lights. من جامع المشرك وسكن معه فإنه مثله. The one who lives among the mushrikeen is from among the mushrikeen. فإنه مثله. He's like al-mushrikeen. Jarir came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was taking bay'ah, and he said, "Oh Rasulullah, give me your hand so that I will give you bay'ah, and set your conditions. What do you want from me?" Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, "أبايعك على أن تعبد الله." The bay'ah is that you worship Allah. وتقيم الصلاة, and you establish salah. وتؤتي زكاة, and you pay zakah. وتناصح المسلمين, and you give advice, نصيحة to the Muslimin. وتفارق المشركين, and you leave the mushrikeen. That was part of the bay'ah that he took from Jarir, that you leave the mushrikeen. Number 3, the ajr of hijrah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in the hadith, إن الشيطان قاعد لابن آدم بأطرقه. Shaitan will wait for you in your path. فقعد له في طريق الإسلام فقال تسلم وتذر دينك ودين آبائك وآباء آبائك فعصاه فأسلم. So Shaitan waited for the son of Adam on his way towards Islam and told him, you want to become a Muslim and leave the religion of your fathers and your forefathers? But the son of Adam disobeyed him and became a Muslim. فقعد له بطريق الهجرة فقال تهاجر وتدع أرضك وسماك. And then he sat for him in his path towards Hijrah, and he said, you're going to leave your land. فعصاه فهاجر, but he disobeyed him and made Hijrah. ثم قعد له بطريق الجهاد فقال تجاهد فهو جهد النفس والمال فتقاتل فتقتل فتنكح المرأة ويقسم المال. He said, you want to fight jihad, and it will cost you your wealth and yourself, and then you will be killed, and your wife will marry somebody else, and your wealth will be inherited and split among others. But he disobeyed him, and he fought jihad fi sabilillah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, فَمَنْ فَعَلَ ذَلِكَ كَانَ حَقًّا عَلَى اللَّهِ أَنْ يُدْخِلَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. Whoever does that, then Allah Azza wa Jal promises him that he will enter him into Jannah. وَمَنْ قُتِلَ كَانَ حَقًّا عَلَى اللَّهِ أَنْ يُدْخِلَ لَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. And whoever is killed in the path of Allah, then Allah will give him Jannah. وَإِنْ غَرِقَ كَانَ حَقًّا عَلى اللَّهِ أَنْ يُدْخِلَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. And if he drowns, then Allah Azza wa Jal will enter him into Jannah. وَإِنْ وَقَصَتْهُ دَابَّتُهُ كَانَ حَقًّا عَلى اللَّهِ أَنْ يُدْخِلَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. And if he falls off his mount and he dies, then Allah Azza wa Jal will enter him into Jannah. Meaning, whatever happens to him, this man will enter into Jannah if he disobeys Shaitan in these 3 paths: Islam, Hijrah, Jihad fi sabilillah. إن الرجل إذا مات بغير مولده قيس له من مولده إلى منقطع أثره في الجنة. This is an interesting hadith. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if you die when you make hijrah, the distance between the place of your birth to the place of your death will be measured, and you will be given equal to that land in Jannah. So the ones who come from places far away like America and Australia, and get a lot of ajr. Long distance. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked, tell me about something to do. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, عليك بالهجرة فإنه لا مثل لها. Make hijrah because there's nothing like it. بواعث الهجرة. Reasons that would make a person do hijrah. Number 1, for the protection of your deen. Allah Azza wa Jal says, يا عبادي الذين آمنوا إن أرضي واسعة فإياي فاعبدون. O my servants who have believed, my land is vast, so worship me. Meaning that you will find a place to worship Allah. You will find a place to worship Allah. If you cannot worship Allah where you are, move out and you will be able to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. Mujahid said, إن أرضي واسعة فهاجروا وجاهدوا فيها. Mujahid said the meaning of this ayah is that my earth is vast, so make hijrah and fight jihad fi sabilillah. So we can say that the interpretation of Mujahid is that there will always be a place to fight jihad fi sabilillah. But you need to make hijrah probably to find that place. Sa'id ibn Jubair said, إذا عمل في الأرض بالمعاصي فاخرجوا منها فإن أرضي واسعة. Sa'id ibn Jubair interprets the ayah to mean, if where you're living the people are sinners, and there's a lot of ma'asi, a lot of sins, then move out and worship Allah Azza wa Jal somewhere else. Like the man who killed 99 and then killed 100. What did the scholar tell him? Move out. Move out. Make hijrah. Matraf bin Abdullah said, أرضي واسعة أي رزقي لكم واسع. He says the meaning is, my earth is vast, so you will find rizq somewhere else. Number 2, reasons for making hijrah: for your safety. And this was the hijrah of the Muslimin from Mecca to Al-Habasha. They did not make hijrah from Dar al-Kufr to Dar al-Islam. They made hijrah from Dar Kufr to Dar Kufr. But they made hijrah from a place where they cannot worship Allah to a place where they can worship Allah. So France tells you that your daughters and sisters and wives cannot wear hijab. Move somewhere else. You will find a place where you can worship Allah Azza wa Jal. You don't have to stay behind and disobey Allah Azza wa Jal when the earth is vast and wide. Why stay behind? when you're banned from fulfilling obligations. There are some things that are mustahab if you leave them. It's different than when you leave things that are wajib. For example, the issue of hijab, this is wajib. This is a faridah. And it's one of the most important fara'id on the Muslim sister. So why stay behind in a land where you cannot fulfill this obligation? Some places where Salat al-Jama'ah is not allowed. Why live in a place where Salat al-Jama'ah is not allowed? The third reason for making hijrah for the sake of jihad fi sabilillah. And this link between hijrah and jihad is apparent in many ayat and ahadith. Allah Azza wa Jal says in Surah Al-Anfal verse 72, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَهَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. The ones who believed and made hijrah and made jihad with their self and their wealth. وَالَّذِينَ آوَوا وَنَصَرُوا. And the ones who welcomed them and supported them. Al-Ansar, أُولَٰئِكَ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. These are the ones who are awliya. In Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 218, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أُولَٰئِكَ يَرْجُونَ رَحْمَةَ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. The ones who believed and the ones who made hijrah and the ones who made jihad fi sabilillah, those are the ones who expect the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal, and Allah is merciful and forgiving. Again, the link between the three things. Surah Al-Nahl verse 110, ثُمَّ إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لِلَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا مِن بَعْدِ مَا فُتِنُوا ثُمَّ جَاهَدُوا وَصَبَرُوا إِنَّ رَبَّكَ مِن بَعْدِهَا لَغَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. It's linking hijrah and jihad. Al-Anfal 74, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَهَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Again, the link between the three deeds. In Surah At-Tawbah verse 20, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَهَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. So again and again, these three acts are linked together. Rasulullah says, إِنَّ الْهِجْرَةَ لَا تَنْقَطِعُ مَا دَامَ الْجِهَادِ. Hijrah doesn't stop as long as there is jihad. And Rasulullah says, لَا تَنْقَطَعَ الْهِجْرَةَ مَا جُوهِدَ الْعَدُوُ. Hijrah will not stop as long as the enemy is being fought. Finally, is hijrah restricted to hijrah from the land of Kufr to the land of Islam? And this is a relevant question for our situation today. الشوكاني says فليس هذا الوجوب أي وجوب الهجرة مختصا بدار الكفر بل هي شريعة قائمة. That the obligation of hijrah is not only restricted to the issue of Dar al-Kufr, but it is an established sharia وسنة ثابتة, and it is sunnah عند استعلان المنكر وعدم الاستطاعة للقيام بواجب الأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر وعدم وجود من يأخذ على أيدي المنتهكين لمحارم الله. فحق على العبد المؤمن أن ينجو بنفسه ويفر بدينه إن تمكن من ذلك ووجد أرضا خالية من التظاهر لمعاصي الله. He says hijrah is not restricted from Dar al-Kufr to Dar al-Islam. You need to make hijrah if you are in a place where you cannot make amr bil ma'ruf and nahy al munkar. And he said that the believer is supposed to find a place where he can worship Allah best. If we apply these words of Ash-Shawkani to our situation today, since we don't have the clear-cut Mecca and Medina today, that doesn't mean that hijrah should be neglected, because hijrah could be from one country to another. Hijrah could be from one city to another in the same country. In fact, hijrah could be from one neighborhood to another neighborhood in the same city. You find in Muslim land, within the city, neighborhoods where the people are conservative and the people are religious, and then you have neighborhoods where there's fasad. Shouldn't a person try to live with his family in the best environment? The issue of hijrah applies whenever you find that you and your family are in fitnah and you cannot worship Allah Azza wa Jal the way you should. And there's another important issue to talk about when we're talking about hijrah fi sabilillah. There are some places, because we said that we have Dar al-Kufr today, but we don't have Dar al-Iman. However, we know that there are some places where, even though it is not classified as Dar al-Iman, because the classification depends on the rule that is applied. A Dar al-Kufr is a place where the rule of Kufr is applied even if the population is Muslim. And Dar al-Iman is a place where the rule of Allah is applied even if the population are non-Muslim. So the classification of Dar al-Kufr and Dar al-Islam depends on the hukm. However, we know that there are places where it is easier to worship Allah Azza wa Jal than other places, even though it is still classified as Dar al-Kufr. And then there's another issue. Why live with your family in a place where every indication shows that it is Dar al-Kufr and will remain Dar al-Kufr? Not only that, but it will be the enemy of the Muslims from now until eternity, as a hadith of Rasulullah state. While there are other places, even if the rule of Allah Azza wa Jalla is not applied yet, but there's every indication that the future for that place is Islam, and the people are heading towards Islam, and Allah Azza wa Jalla is preparing the people to become Muslims and to carry the message of Islam. So when we talked about Asham, for example, in the previous lecture, even though the rule of Allah Azza wa Jalla is not being applied on Asham today, but every indication shows that Asham is heading towards Islam, and Asham will be land of Islam, and it will be the land that we want to be close to, because that is where the events, the important events of Islam will be occurring. Same things could apply to Medina, to Mecca, to Al-Yaman, to Khurasan, Iraq. So yes, there is no Dar al-Islam today, but I'm responsible for where I bring up my children. And if I'm the one who chose for them to live in Dar al-Kufr, then I'm responsible for them and responsible for their grandchildren and so on and so forth. Because I didn't make that decision of taking them out and putting them in a better environment. And even better than that, better than living in a Sham or living in one of the places that Rasulullah has talked about in the hadith, is to make hijrah to the land of Rabat and the land of jihad fi sabilillah. Because Rasulullah says, رِبَاطُ يَوْمٍ وَلَيْلَةٍ خَيْرٌ مِّن صِيَامِ شَهْرٍ وَقِيَامِهِ. The ribat of one day and night is better than the fasting of an entire month. And Rasulullah says, موقف ساعة في سبيل الله خير من قيام ليلة القدر عند الحجر الأسود. And standing in the battlefield for Rasulullah said ساعة. Sa'a is a small, it's not literally an hour, but it's a part of the day. Standing in a saf for that moment is better than Laylatul Qadr, and you're right next to the black stone. And Rasulullah says, رِبَاطُ يَوْمٍ فِي سَبِيلَّهِ خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أَلْفِ يَوْمٍ فِي مَسْوَى. The ribat of one day fi sabilillah is better than 1,000 nights in other places. A woman came to Rasulullah and said, "Oh Rasulullah, my husband went out for ghazu fi sabilillah, and I used to pray behind him when he would pray, and I used to follow his ibadah. So if he fast, I would fast. If he make dhikr, I would make dhikr. If he reads Quran, I would read Quran. I would follow my husband in all of his ibadah. So tell me about something to do that will make my deeds equal to his." So this woman, she would do equal to her husband when he was with her. Now he's in ghazu, so she wants to do something equivalent to her husband. She wants to be equal to him. Rasulullah told her, أَتَسْتَطِيعِينَ أَن تَقُومِي وَلَا تَقْعُدِي وَتَصُومِي وَلَا تَفْطُرِي وَتَذْكُرُ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى وَلَا تَفْطُرِي حَتَّى يَرْجَعَ. Can you pray the entire night until he comes back? And can you fast every day until he comes back? And can you make dhikr of Allah continuously until he comes back? She said, "No, I can't, O Rasulullah." Rasulullah said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَوْ طُوِّقْتِيهِ مَا بَلَغْتِ الْعُشْرِ مِنْ عَمَلِهِ. Even if you were able to, all of what you would do would not be equal to 1/10 of what he's doing now. It won't be equal to 1/10 of what he's doing now, so don't even try. Where was this woman living? She was living in Medina. She was living in Medina, the place where your salah is multiplied by 1,000. No. So hijrah fi sabilillah was an important ibadah. A Muslim doesn't want to be in a situation where he's paying taxes to the enemies of Allah Azza wa Jalla and they're using his money to fight the Muslims. He doesn't want to be in a situation where he's increasing the numbers of the kuffar. He doesn't want to be in the situation where the kuffar are using him to give fatwa against his own people. or to fight against the ummah. A Muslim doesn't want to be in a situation where he will be the cause of the fitna of his children and his grandchildren. A Muslim doesn't want to be in a situation where he might be able to worship Allah Azza wa Jal, but it's going to be difficult for his wife, it's going to be difficult for his kids to carry on the path of Allah Azza wa Jal. So it's necessary for the Muslim to find a place that is best for his ibadah. We shouldn't be looking for the place which is best for our rizq. We should be looking for the place that is best for our ibadah, and then Allah Azza wa Jal will take care of the rizq. That should be our objective when it comes to hijrah fi sabilillah.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة عليها ملائكة غلاظ شداد لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون.